Hey there, it's Tom Ryan, founder and CEO of ICR. Before we get into the next episode, I wanted to ask that you subscribe to the show. It'll help us get even more unique and interesting guests on the podcast and in turn continue to educate management teams and the growing ecosystem that creates value for fast-growing private and public companies. And while you're at it, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating. Very much appreciated.
America has dropped the ball when it comes to critical minerals. China controls the mining. They also control the processing of many of these critical minerals, and they're very hard to find.
The Trump administration has made reindustrializing America a top priority, but to do that, we're going to need access to an abundant source of metals like copper, manganese, and nickel. The challenge then is to find a way to source these materials, one that doesn't rely on the Chinese supply chain and won't lead to serious environmental harm.
These little bundles of metal sit on the ocean floor like golf balls on a driving range, unattached. We don't have to dig or tunnel to get to them. They're just laying there.
My name is Tom Ryan, and this is Welcome to the Arena, the ICR podcast. Each week, I sit down with today's business leaders to give you an inside scoop on some of America's most prosperous public companies, their origins, their challenges, and the keys to their success. Our guest today is Gerard Barron. He is the co-founder, CEO, and chairman of The Metals Company, which trades on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange under the symbol TMC. The Metals Company's mission is to harvest and process metal-containing nodules from the seafloor, providing a clean and abundant source of raw materials for an array of critical industries like steelmaking and EV production. Gerard is going to walk us through the evolution of TMC, their groundbreaking technology, and some recent regulatory breakthroughs that have brought them closer to achieving their goals. So let's enter the arena with Gerard Barron. So for those that don't know, what does the Metals Company do?
We're all about opening up a new supply of critical minerals. And for the first time, we'll be going to the ocean to get these important metals that the world agrees we're going to need billions of tons more of. 70% of our planet is covered by our oceans, yet we get no metals out of there. And of course, as we need more of these critical minerals, we're pushing into more and more pristine biodiverse ecosystems, in particular, our tropical rainforest. About 1,000 miles southwest of San Diego, there lies the world's biggest patch of polymetallic nodules, like the one I have in my hand, about the size of a potato, and they precipitate the metals that are in the seawater or the sediment. So they grow a little bit like a pearl grows. And these nodules just happen to be rich in nickel and copper and cobalt and manganese. And those are metals that we need to build steel, to build batteries, to build super strong alloys that you see in the defense industry. And of course, what the world has woken up to is that China dominates the supply of these critical minerals. And so this is an opportunity for the United States to play a massive game of catch-up. And by supporting the Metals Company as we permit this resource and bring it to America.
Yeah, it's really fascinating what you're doing. What's the founding story of the company and how's it evolved over time?
Well, we have to go back to the 1970s when this industry almost got started. And it was actually dominated by American companies. So they built the technology to pick up these nodules. They had a drill ship, the Global Explorer. They had a robot that was operating on the seafloor. Didn't look as nice as the ones we build today. Rio Tinto built a processing plant to be able to process these nodules. The US government, NOAA, put in place regulations to enable the go forward of the industry. But then the United Nations got involved and America slowed down their interest. And so I guess what then happened was other activities happened, other resources were found, and then a treaty was signed called UNCLOS. And that's now been signed by 169 countries. America is not one of them, nor are more than 20 other countries. And that treaty called for the establishment of the International Seabed Authority. And they were put in place regulations to allow the go forward of this industry. And, surprisingly, 30 years later, We still don't have the final regulations because those 169 countries still are arguing a little bit about what the final rules can be. So 2011, the company saw an opportunity to go and claim an area, which we did, sponsored by the nation of Nauru.
Yep.
Followed by the Kingdom of Tonga sponsoring another application in 2012. And so we set this company up in 2011 with the express purpose of developing this resource. And until President Trump was elected, we thought we were going to permit ourselves through that international body. But two things happened. One was they dragged their feet. NGOs got involved and slowed down the regulations, the final regulations. And then finally, President Trump was elected and he chose a cabinet who we were very familiar with when they were in opposition. They'd been big supporters of our project and our company. And then, of course, he launched into the reindustrialization phase. How do we solve for the critical mineral supply chain? How do we bring industry back to America? How do we bring better jobs back to America? And how do we make sure that we never find ourselves vulnerable again, like America has been, thanks to its reliance on China and to a lesser degree, Russia? And so 2011, we had a bit of experience prior to that in the ocean development space with one of the forerunners in the industry called Nautilus. And that taught us some things to do and to not do. I was an investor in that company. I never worked there. But this is the big game. This is the big opportunity to provide a better supply of critical minerals with a much less impact on human life and the environment.
Yeah, I'm sure those that might be against what you're doing, might pull the environmental card like it's a bad thing. But meanwhile, the land-based supply chains in these critical minerals are environmentally destructive, geopolitically fragile. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the land-based supply chains and how destructive they really are.
Well, it would be wrong to put all mining companies into the one basket because there are some really responsible mining companies and they operate in, with very high standards in very low impact areas. Australia is a classic example. We have a big continent. It's a lot of desert type environments and a lot of mining goes on in those environments. And so, the potential for impact is quite low. But with our nodules, about half of the revenue comes from nickel. And if you look at 100% of the growth in nickel production in the last 7 years, it's come from tropical rainforest nickel laterite ore bodies. Now, the problem with that is that to get to the metal-bearing ore, you have to remove the rainforest that sits above it.
Yeah.
And of course, that means everything that lives in there. And so, and I always encourage people to strip back to first principle thinking. We should be carrying out extractive industries in parts of the planet where there is the least life, not the most life. And today, that's what's happening. We're going to our tropical rainforests. And I sometimes hear people say, well, they're both important and that, one's as bad as the other. It's like, how can you possibly come to that conclusion?
Yeah.
They're both important, granted. But how can you compare mowing down a tropical rainforest that's filled with life? The amount of biomass is measured in 40, 50 kilograms per square meter compared to the abyssal plain. Half of the entire planet is categorized as the abyssal plain or hills. Half of the planet. So it's the most common area on our planet. We measure the life down there in grams per square meter. There's about 10 grams of living matter per square meter. And most of that, like 75+%, is single cell organisms living in the sediment.
Yeah.
So they don't compare. And so, of course, what our studies have focused on is, okay, just because there's not much life doesn't mean it's not important. Let's see what the impact will be of taking away these nodules, of kicking up some sediment as our robots move through picking up these rocks. How quickly does the area recover? And of course, that's the exciting thing. We now have more than a petabyte of environmental data that our company alone has gathered. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this very topic that shows what the impact will be. And the good news is they're a fraction of what we thought they might be.
Yeah.
And so it's a clear choice. And I think society needs to see that. It's a trade-off. Do we want this resource from this environment with these set of impacts, or do we want to turn a blind eye and continue to destroy some of the most pristine ecosystems and all of the communities of people that live amongst them. And of course, the knock-on impacts as these waste materials find their ways to rivers and oceans, impacting livelihoods there. Honestly, it's such a clear-cut use case to go to the ocean to get these nodules.
Having made the economic, environmental, and national security case for why seafloor metal harvesting is critical, I wanted Gerard to take a deeper dive, pun intended, into the tech that will make this all possible.
The good news is these little bundles of metal sit on the ocean floor like golf balls on a driving range, unattached. We don't have to dig or tunnel to get to them. They're just laying there. So our robots go down there and fire a jet of water at them, which creates an inverse pressure, which effectively allows us to lift the nodules from the seafloor. So we don't go down there and plow the ocean floor. The trials that were done back in the 1970s, instead of using the crawlers that we use now, the treads, a little bit like a snowplow, they used Archimedes screw drive to propel themselves. And so these screws that went around like this, and they made a big furrow in the ocean floor about up to 80 centimeters deep.
Yeah.
Whereas our machines make an imprint of about 3 centimeters deep. In fact, one of our challenges is keeping them on the floor. And so technology has really advanced in efficiency and reliability, but also impact. And then we separate the sediment from the nodules in the collector. And then the nodules go into a transport system where we use water. So we inject into our air riser compressed air about a third of the way down. And those compressed air bubbles expand, they rise, they create a vacuum. And so we pump the nodules up to the production vessel. We then offload them to a transporter, which takes them to shore for processing.
I know that you recently submitted the first ever application for commercial recovery permit, right, under the U.S. Seabed Mining Code. What's the significance of that for not only your company, but the industry?
Well, the significance is there's been a lot of talking about it, and now it's action time. And all of the stars are aligned. You know, we've got a regulator who has rules to allow this industry to happen. We are the only company in the world who could submit that commercial recovery permit because for the last 14 years, we've been out there spending more than $600 million on all of the environmental studies that are necessary to be able to make the submission. The notion that this will be an easier permitting pathway through the USA is wrong. The environmental oversight will continue to be strong, but there are regulations that you can work under. And with a regulator that wants to see the industry move forward, providing environmental impacts can be understood and managed. And so the significance is important because America has dropped the ball when it comes to critical minerals. China controls the mining. They also control the processing of many of these critical minerals. And they're very hard to find, or they've been mined out already, or they're in environmental conditions that don't allow them to be mined. And so the ocean is something that is the perfect place to be going to look for these. And of course, China's out there with us. You know, China have 5 licenses in international waters through the International Seabed Authority. They are a long way behind us. We have gained a lead, which we're making that lead now available to the United States to play a serious game of catch up.
You mentioned the International Seabed Authority. Have you faced roadblocks with them in the past?
Unfortunately, what many people warned me could be an outcome did eventuate, and that is, you know, bureaucracy, intergovernmental organizations are just very difficult, moribund organizations to get your way through.
Yeah.
You know, they meet twice a year. There's a big body of people who live and work in Kingston, which is where the organization is based. And they will continue pushing. China will continue to dominate that organization because when the USA isn't involved, China's the next big voice. And China want to get this industry moving because, of course, people often forget that China suffers resource anxiety as well.
Yeah.
Because they don't mine these metals in China, they mine them in foreign countries. And of course, those countries can change the rules. They can pull out the not welcome mat, or they can nationalize assets or change the royalty rates. So, China loves the idea of being able to develop this ocean-based resource because they can send them straight to China. So it'll be interesting to see how the International Seabed Authority gets its act together. I wish them well, and I look forward to seeing those license holders out there alongside us in years to come.
Yeah. We only briefly talked about the demand side of the equation and the end markets. Maybe you can talk about those end markets and how nickel, cobalt, copper, manganese, how it all kind of fits in. Because I would think it's also an issue of national defense for the United States.
If you think about how did America become a superpower? Well, they came into World War II and they dominated with their Navy because they were very good at building ships. Now, not so good at building ships, not so good at making steel. And of course, they want to change that. They want to get back into bringing some of those industries back home. And you can't make a ton of steel without manganese. America imports its manganese now. You can't make super hardened alloys without nickel. America imports all its nickel now, and the same with cobalt. And of course, copper has such a wide and varied application. And so, there's a simple saying, if it ain't growing, it's mined.
Yeah.
And those base metals play such a critical part in the supply chain. And so, for general industry, for items that turn up in your household, to big industry, bridges, ships, and batteries, of course, and robots. And of course, the transition to EVs has taken a little bit of a slowdown, but, mark my word, it's moving that way.
It's coming. Yeah.
And it will continue. And of course, the electrification of heavy transport, of trains, of planes, and of course, these humanoid robots and drones, like we're just beginning. So the demand is just beginning. And of course, we also have a growing population. We have the industrialization of the developing world continuing, and all of that continues to put a demand on the critical minerals that are available globally.
And you mentioned the energy transition in EVs. What specifically is used in the EVs? It's just the battery making?
I mean, batteries began with a very rich nickel cathode. And because of the high price of nickel, I mean, some years ago, nickel went to $100,000 a ton. It's $15,000 a ton now.
Yeah.
So manufacturers were motivated to find a way of using less nickel. But unfortunately, nickel-based cathodes provide the best long-range performance. They perform best in cold weather. And so people like them. But there is a transition into more manganese and nickel-based cathodes. There's also in the last 5-7 years, the emergence of LFP batteries has been very powerful. Now, there's actually a bit of a swing away from LFP in some manufacturers because they've been looking to find a way of transitioning out of lithium. And so sodium-based chemistries have been making a big push into the market. And the sodium-based chemistries use nickel in their cathode. So we're taking a market segment that doesn't use any nickel or cobalt and replacing it with a segment that will. But if you want high performance batteries, which you certainly do in robotics and in drones and other applications, and generally in high performance car batteries to help solve range anxiety and other factors, then nickel based chemistries will continue to play. And I think what we'll see over time, though, is that the nickel in the cathode might move down from 90% to a lower number. But that's all good because it's an expanding market, because we don't have enough nickel, even in our massive deposits, to satisfy the whole market going nickel-based chemistry. So it needs to be a blend.
Yep, for sure. One exciting thing I read was the company announced an investment from Korea Zinc. What kind of impact are you expecting from that partnership and that investment? It sounds like a huge deal.
It's a big deal for us. And when we look around the world, as we have done, Korea Zinc are the only partner outside of China that can deliver to us a more integrated refining flow sheet. And they have just built something in Korea that we would very much like to bring to the USA, a way of taking these nodules and some of the intermediate materials and turning them into some of the battery material precursors that are necessary for the EV market. And so what we're looking for is to take out execution risk.
Yep.
And we're looking for speed and we're looking for capital. And Korea Zinc bring all of those things. They want to have more investment in the United States. Korea is a very good trading partner with the United States, so friendships are very strong there. Korea Zinc is a great company led by the grandson of the original founder, who I've built a personal relationship with. He's a great leader. We're very proud to have them as our partner. And I know that the administration will be very happy to see companies like Korea Zinc come and lay down billions of dollars of more investment in the United States alongside us to help reindustrialize industry in the USA.
Yeah. And I think one of the advantages also is that, this investment and everything they bring to the table allows you and the US to bypass the Chinese supply chain.
That's right.
Right? I mean, that's massive for our self-interest as a country. And obviously, that would be great for the metals company.
Yeah, big time.
We're sitting here kind of in July of 25. When you look at the next 12 months, what are your main priorities? What are you really excited about?
Look, I'm excited about getting our vessel ready for production. I expect we'll have ourselves a commercial recovery permit well within that time frame. We will have, without doubt, announced some new partnerships, both on the customer side and also in the ecosystem side here in the USA. We'll be fast tracking exactly where we'll be building that processing facility in the USA, because on day one, we'll send nodules to most likely Japan, because there's nowhere in the USA that we can process nodules today.
Yeah.
But the administration have made very clear, which aligns with our best intentions as well, that we want to build industry here. We want to bring back those jobs. We want to bring back that supply chain. We've identified a couple of sites that we think it would be appropriate to build such a facility. And so it's going to be a really exciting time. And, the most important thing is get into production as quickly as we can, and then scale production as quickly as we can in the way that protects our shareholder equity in the most efficient way. And, we'll be hosting a strategy day soon. We're going to be very excited to reveal more to the market about those project economics. I think people are going to love them. They're going to love our strategy going forward, because we plan to be a disruptor. We've planned it since we first started talking about it to the market as a private company, back when I took over as chairman and CEO. And I think that, the other thing we're going to want to do is attract more talent into the business. Now, at the moment, we have Allseas, who are a very important partner of ours, who are one of the world's biggest layers of pipe for the oil and gas industry. So for 40 years, they've been solving those deep technical challenges. So they help us on the offshore side. And of course, Korea Zinc help us on the onshore side. We also just took a large investment from the Hess family. And of course, they're synonymous with offshore oil and gas. Hess Corp have developed the world's biggest offshore oil and gas well. We were very pleased to welcome Alex Spiro to our board as well. So we're really building an American first team around this opportunity, and, just expect more good news around all of that.
Yeah, I mean, the cap table sounds incredible, and that puts you in a position to raise further capital if you need it, bring in strategic investors that are more than just a dollar. Is private equity kind of looking at this space, just out of curiosity?
Sure. I mean, we have always talked to private equity, but, the one thing that they have always been concerned about was permitting certainty. And so I can tell you they love the pathway we're going now. And I think the role they would play is if we decide to take outside capital into US-based assets, then that's where they would chime in. And so, it's such a nice transformation, because we've had such a loyal group of shareholders to get us to where we are. And, it's no secret that we had to fight hard. And, our opponents would say, NGOs mainly, you're going to run out of money, or you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're never going to get a permit. I mean, for us, we always have a backup plan. We knew we had shareholders who would continue to fund the business, me being one of them, Allseas being another, and a very dear friend of mine who's also on the board, Andre Karkar, being another. So we knew we had a loyal group of people who would keep supporting the business. But it's very nice now to be having the phone ringing nonstop of people that want to explore what they can do with us. And of course, we'll be very gracious in that. But at the moment, we only want to attract people that can really add value. And Korea Zinc is a great example. The Hess family was another great example because they not only bring me amazing heritage when it comes to the offshore oil and gas industry, but they also, John Hess is one of the most respected business guys in the United States. And he has an amazing network and people respect him and they'll take his phone call, and they get me into doors that I otherwise wouldn't get into.
That was Gerard Barron, chairman and CEO of the Metals Company, who has spent a decade and over $500 million redefining how the United States might source critical minerals for energy, defense, manufacturing, and infrastructure. And now, with the support of Washington and aided by a really impressive cap table, TMC seems poised to deliver on their mission and deliver a whole lot of value to shareholders. It'll be fascinating to watch over the next few years as they gear themselves up to become a major player in the global critical mineral supply chain. I'm Tom Ryan. I'll see you next time back in the arena.
References to specific stocks are not intended to be recommendations for specific trading behavior. Comments presented on this podcast are intended for informational and educational purposes only, and do not represent opinions or recommendations on whether to buy, sell, or hold shares of a particular stock. All investors are advised to conduct their own independent research into individual stocks before making a trading decision. In addition, investors are advised that past stock performance is no guarantee of future price performance.